great to be here. My last few visits to Fayette County were to attend funerals for Minnie and Hartman Jameson and Viola McFerrin and to celebrate their lives. I was moved that Hartman's funeral was described as a homecoming, the occasion when our precious gift of life is surrendered back to the earth, a return to the source. Today is for me a kind of homecoming as well, a return to the community that reset the direction of my life, an opportunity to pay my respects to the remarkable people I met here by delivering to all of you the book that came from that encounter. If you're expecting me to describe what's in that book, I'm going to disappoint you. Those of you who are already acquainted with our portion of hell will understand. Our portion of hell is not my book or my telling of the Fayette County grassroots movement. It's a history told in many voices, not by an outside observer like me, but by the people who lived and made that history. My role was simply to encourage people to tell their stories and to keep out of their way while they did it. What happened during those years of the movement and what its significance is, all this is told by members of your community. My first visit to Fayette County was in March of 1965, so I was a latecomer to most of the events described in our portion of hell. I was a sympathetic listener to the stories people shared, but the book is not my story. It's theirs, it's yours. Open the book and meet your forebears from 1 and 2 generations ago. They will speak to you. They will guide you through their extraordinary struggle far better than I can hope to do. So it seems we have an odd situation here. We've got a book signing where the author is reluctant to talk about the contents of his book. Yet I've looked forward to this visit for months, and there are things I very much want to say. I want to share with you memories and reflections of an encounter that thrust me into adult life, its seriousness, its responsibilities, and possibilities. I was deeply upset by what I saw in the news: bloody beatings of freedom riders, violence at lunch counter sit-ins, Bull Connor's fire hoses and police dogs, brutal attacks on nonviolent civil rights workers that all of you are familiar with. But sympathetic feelings or expressions of anger shared amongst friends is, after all, a pretty lame response. Eldridge Cleaver's words, "You either have to be part of the solution or you're going to be part of the problem," felt like a direct accusation. Why wasn't I part of the solution? Why was I a spectator watching the civil rights movement unfold on TV? I answered that question by joining a group of students from the University of Chicago who came to Fayette County over a 10-day spring break to contribute their labor, extremely unskilled labor, I might add, to help build a community center. Our efforts were appreciated, but in truth, we accomplished very little. We spent a couple of days installing ceiling panels, only to discover that we'd neglected to put in the insulation. So all our work came down and we had to start again. I think our most important contribution as a group was simply that we showed up. A bunch of idealistic white kids expressing solidarity with a black community unaccustomed to interacting with white people who respected and admired them. This leads me to what for me is the main subject of this talk. First, let me ask for a show of hands. How many of you have ever welcomed an absolute stranger into your home? And before you do that, let's make it more unlikely. Welcomed a stranger of a different race into your home as an overnight guest. Okay. In our racially divided country, this rarely happens. Yet during the civil rights movement, families in every district of Fayette County opened their homes to white college students, total strangers, providing them with bed and board. It was an amazing experiment in living. After an all-night drive from Chicago, I pulled into John McFerrin's grocery store along with 3 fellow students. There we met Hartman Jameson, who piled me and another guy into his pickup truck and drove us to his bungalow at the end of a muddy road a mile or so off Highway 76, where we met his wife Minnie and his son James. If we were not nervous, then we were certainly excessively polite. Hartman and Minnie were eager to make us feel comfortable. Mike and me were equally eager to be agreeable. We were strangers to one another, and no one wanted to offend. What got us through that initial awkwardness was Hartman's deep reserve of self-respect. He was neither vain nor self-important, but he knew in his gut that no one, be they white, rich, or powerful, was any better than him. He was proud to be living on land his grandfather, a former slave, had bought. He was proud to have served his country in World War II, proud to be married to Minnie, proud to be James's father, and yes, he was proud to be a founder of the original Fayette County Civic and Welfare League. It never would have occurred to him to feel in any way ashamed of the home he welcomed us into. It wasn't long before all of us were asking questions, sharing stories, talking about our families, and overcoming the distance between us. When it came time to sleep, Mike and I squeezed into bed with James, 3 to a bed. That was how my first day in Fayette County drew to its close. I was at the end of a country road in a simple bungalow, heated by a wood-burning stove, laying down to sleep with a teenager I'd known for only a few hours. Yet I felt very much at home. As I said, Hartman's self-respect and good humor carried the day. By the next morning, I realized there was no indoor plumbing. So I geared up my courage. I thought I was really being great and asked him where I could find the outhouse. He was greatly amused. He tossed me a roll of toilet paper and said, "Well, Bob, if you go right up the hill, you'll have a nice view of the pond. Or you can go out that way and look at the okra. Or down by there, you can look at the cows. Wherever you want, but you won't find no outhouse." The work my group did on the community center took up our days, but what I valued most was getting to know the Jameson family and appreciating the beauty and rhythm of everyday farm life. It sounds like a simple thing, but I discovered that many of the young people on my project were depressed by their homestays. Their families were poor, living in homes without familiar comforts, and many students could not see beyond that. They never found an opening to easy conversation with the host families. How very fortunate I was. Hartman and Minnie were poor as well, but I never felt that they lacked the essential ingredients for a worthy and fulfilling life. For everyone else in my group, our March visit to Fayette County was their last. But here's where Minnie came in. She was one of the few people I met in Fayette County who continued her education past 8th grade. Everyone I met could read, and most people could write a little bit, but rarely did. But Minnie was truly literate. When I returned to Chicago, we exchanged letters. Minnie reported to me about league activities, life on the farm, Hartman's beloved cows, whatever came to mind. What was important is that we never lost touch. Her letters were my link to Fayette County. Without her literacy, my first visit would have been my last. But thanks to our correspondence, I returned several times on short visits, not as a civil rights worker, but as a family friend. In time, my family circle grew to include the McFerrins and the Toleses. Yes, the starting point for all this was my brief visit as a civil rights worker. But out of our common cause came lasting personal ties, deepening affection and loyalty. When John McFerrin was assaulted and nearly murdered outside the county courthouse in 1970, I felt an urgent need to do something. But what? The days of the civil rights activism in the South had largely passed. There was no way I could summon a group of students to rush to Somerville to stand beside him. I felt powerless. But our portion of hell came out of that powerlessness. I would honor John's courage and the grassroots movement my friends led by inviting community members to tell their personal stories in what would be a shared history. I had to quit my teaching job to conduct those interviews, but no matter. I was on a mission, and nothing I'd done up to that point in my life mattered as much as this. Viola McFerrin had a way of putting things clearly, and she often said that your life gets bigger when it's not about you, that by helping people, you help yourself. Well, that's the effect that working on our portion of hell had for me. My work on that book drew me even closer to my Fayette County friends. I lived with the Jamesons for several months. Hartman taught me how to make red-eye gravy. Claudia McFerrin tried unsuccessfully to braid my hair. The Horton family gave me a standing invitation to drop by their raucous household whenever I was in the neighborhood. Along with Hartman and Laverne Tolles, I took 2 carloads of Tolles and McFerrin children to the WDIA Starlight Review in Memphis, where the kids were on the constant lookout for my reaction to some very suggestive dancing on stage. What would Bob Hamburger do when Rufus Thomas started doing whatever he did? And on a warm summer night, I took Daphne and her siblings to a triple feature at a Memphis drive-in. Blackula, Jim Brown in Slaughter, and Fred Williams in Hammer. How inappropriate for a bunch of kids, huh? There I was with 5 adorable children sprawled on the hood of my car, stuffing themselves on candy and soda and blaxploitation movies. I couldn't have been happier. What I want to say then is that although our portion of hell was an effort to preserve an important chapter of civil rights history, it came into being as a gesture of love, an expression of gratitude to people who welcomed me into their homes and their lives, who, like me, did not simply believe in racial equality, but who accepted the possibility we could be trusted friends. All this happened a long time ago, but those memories are very much alive in me, as are the friendships that have lasted those many years. So, thank you, my friends. It's good to be home.